Project for today is going to be this 2018 Honda CB500X. We need to put some new clutch plates in it. I've got the Honda clutch plates here. Got the actual Honda ones, the OEM replacement. We got the friction discs and the steel discs to replace. So we gotta drain the oil out of it, and we'll have to take this cover off and this cable off here, and there should be fairly easy access to the clutch under here. I've never done one of these bikes in particular, but I've done quite a few other ones and they're all fairly similar. So this one is a mechanical throw though, and some of them do have a hydraulic clutch, which makes it a little bit more complicated, but this one's mechanical, so it's a little bit more straightforward. So I'll get you set up and we'll get started. So this one had a skid plate on it, which I removed. I didn't record taking that off, as that's not really typical to have that big aftermarket skid plate on it, but basically it's just a bunch of bolts you take out and it pops off of there. Nothing too difficult. And then get underneath here, I've got a socket on there already. I'll drain the oil out of that plug there, and then we'll get started pulling that cover. I just figured since we're gonna be pulling this, there might be some drippage with oil and stuff, so it'd be better to just have that skid plate out of the way so we can shove some rags up in there and stuff to keep it clean. So we'll see how tight this drain plug is. Well, that wasn't too bad. I left the bracket from the skid plate in there, so it's making it a little bit more difficult to get off of there, but get the pan under there. Probably gonna get it all over my hand since I didn't take that bracket off. Oh, that wasn't too bad. That oil's pretty clean. Must not have been too many miles on that, but we have to drain it to take this cover off. The oil will come out. Most of it. There's still the sump down below it would stay in, but you're better off just draining it, and we'll put new stuff in when we're done. So this is one of the ways you adjust the clutch here. I'm gonna loosen this nut. When you are adjusting it, you just want to make sure there's a slight amount of play like there is in this one. So I know they already did try to adjust it, and the clutch was still slipping when the engine got hot. So that pretty much tells you that your clutch is about shot. That's the first sign, and then eventually it just won't work even when it's cold. But this one we're doing before it gets that bad. So I'm gonna take that one out first, and we can get this clutch cable hopefully off there. You just kind of push in on it, and then it pushes past where it's hooked in there, so it comes off. So I'll tuck that back there. And then it's just all the rest of these Allen bolts that were, they're 5mm. So we'll start removing all of those. I'm gonna loosen them all first. I kind of like to go in a little bit of a zigzag pattern when you're taking aluminum parts off, especially when they're this big. If it's bolted down one side, it can kind of warp it if you take them all off in like a circle. It's not always a big deal, but it's just a habit I've gotten into with taking stuff apart and putting it back together. I think that's the last one. I like to use that Milwaukee ratchet or a regular ratchet when you're breaking stuff loose, especially the Allens, because you can end up stripping them out if you use a regular impact. But now that we got them loose, I'll just zip them out with this. It's a lot faster. Well, I must have forgot to loosen that one. It's looking like they're all the same length bolts. I like to check that as I'm taking them out, just to make sure we don't put them in the wrong spot when we go to put it back together. So now there is a little pry point here and another one down here, so I'll get something to pry that off with. You don't usually want to pry between the covers if you can help it. They end up just wrecking the surface here. But this doesn't run an actual gasket, it's like a gasket maker, so like a 3-bond or a anaerobic type gasket is what I like to use on stuff like this. Oh, we left a bolt back here behind the clutch arm. That should be all of them now. Well, this pry point up here, there's not really, I can kind of get a little bit of a bite on it, but I can't, there's no really fulcrum point that I can get it off of there. So I'm going to try this bottom one and go off the exhaust. I don't want to pry too hard, but we'll see if it'll crack loose. That's still on there pretty good. I'm going to get a rubber mallet and maybe tap on it and see, or maybe we can get on the back side of this with something. So I'm on the back side of this one. I can get a little bit of a tap on it. You can hear the noise change a little bit. I'm gonna try, so if I pulled on this and that actually pushes on the clutch, so it'll push this cover off when it's unbolted like this. So once I broke it a little bit loose, then we're able to do that. The bottom is still stuck just a little bit. Now I'm just hitting on the actual pry points. You don't want to hit on the actual cover. And then in here, that's the little part that when you pull the lever, you can see it go up and down there. That's what presses on the center of the clutch. So this is the clutch pack. It looks like our oil drained pretty good. A lot of the times it still drains quite a bit out. Everything seems to look okay. The clutch plates look a little dark, like they were burnt a little bit, but I'm not seeing too much of a problem. So we're going to take these 4 bolts out. They are under spring tension. I'm going to take this center, that's the pusher that disengages the clutch. And then there's a little bearing in here. That actually feels really good yet. So we'll start doing these slowly because they are under spring tension. I think we've almost got all the tension off. Yep. There's another one where you don't really want to just go taking them off fast and not zigzagging anything, because it can end up can end up breaking that plate if it comes really crooked. Especially right at the beginning. Once you get some pressure off, it's less likely to break. I don't know if any of this has to be indexed, but I am gonna put a mark here so when we put it back together, everything is still gonna be in the same order. Sometimes they're balanced, so everything should be in the same order that it was when it came apart. So I'm gonna do that just to make sure. I don't see any marks. A lot of times there'll be dots or something. There is a little painted dot here, but as long as we mark it where it's at now, it should be fine. I'm gonna use a paint marker. We'll just mark all that. We're probably gonna clean all this stuff up so the mark might come off, but I'll try to keep it on there. And we'll pull this the rest of the way out, and then there'll be a nut underneath this that I need to take off to get the whole clutch hub out. So they'll usually be in the manual, there'll be a height. You'll measure these to see if they're sagged out, which these ones actually look like they're okay. I've seen them where they're squished, so there won't be a gap hardly between the rows of them. So these ones look okay. I'll look up what they're supposed to be for height just to make sure. And then our nut in the center there has to come off, which that one looks like it's just it's got a little thing that's pounded in to a keyway there. We'll get something and tap that up. So I'm just going to take a really small punch and see if I can get under here to pound that up. There we go. It's still a little bit down, but it should pop past. There we go. So this is a 27mm nut. We'll see if the smaller impact will take it. It wasn't too tight. And there's a little washer behind it. That washer is marked. It says outside on it, so gotta make sure it goes back that way. There's a couple washers actually. This one is not marked. I'll still lay it in there in the same orientation though. And we should be able to pull this off of here now. That was under a little bit of spring tension. So there's our clutch pack. And we'll get that on the bench and we'll take it apart and see what was going on with that. So we'll pull this center hub out first. And there's a spacer ring in here that can just stay there. So we're basically looking for score marks in here. But I don't see anything that would indicate a problem. Sometimes these have to go on there the same way also, so maybe I'll mark that and that to make sure that's the same spot. I'm probably being overcautious with marking everything, but I've run into a lot of different scenarios with doing these clutches, so I just want to make sure that we get it back together right. Yeah, that clutch plate's pretty wore down. It's probably hard to see on camera, and they're really black. They shouldn't look black like that. That means it's already been burnt a couple times. This one's really discolored. You look at it in the right light, you can see the bluing, and you can see it transferred the clutch material. So that's a little bit smaller clutch disc. And then we've got a wider one here. You can see the width here is wider. So I'm just going to keep going and flipping them. the same way every time. That way we can have a reference when we're putting the new ones in here. They all look about the same, pretty bad condition. I'm actually surprised it grabbed as good as it did when it was cold as war as this is, and how burnt the discs are. But this looks okay, it's not real worn, so that's a good sign. And then inside here, you want to check for, I'm not sure what you'd really call them. I always called them chatter marks, but you can kind of see where every one of the clutch plates hits there. It'll jerk back and forth kind of when you're in and out of the clutch, so you want that to be fairly smooth. And this one actually feels okay. There's a little bit of a bump there on each one, but I think that'll be fine, so we shouldn't have to replace the clutch basket. If that's always something to check. If they're really deep grooves, your clutch will stick, and basically there's no point in putting clutch plates in there because it'll bind and it won't move in and out, so you're not gonna gain anything by putting new clutch plates in, other than they'll just slip again, and then it'll wreck them again if they're sticking like that. I've seen them with super deep grooves in here where you can see it off to the side, and you can take emery cloth or something and sand them down and get them smooth again, but then there's just more play in there, so unless they're just a small groove, you pretty much have to just replace the clutch basket. So I was just inspecting everything after I got it tore apart, and this oil pump chain here is pretty loose. It's actually, you can pull it down and it's starting to fall away from the sprocket. That's kind of a bad design. This does have a lot of miles on it though, and I'm guessing that this is original. So I'm not sure the actual spec on how tight this should be, but I'm almost 100% sure that it should be tighter than that, because we have, like, hold on, I'll set you up here. Let's see. If I hold my finger here like that, it's probably almost a ½ inch away of slop that we have in that, so I'm guessing it should be like 1/8 of an inch, maybe even 1/4, but not that much. So I'm gonna call the customer and see if they want me to replace this. I'm thinking it's fairly inexpensive and it's not that hard to replace. I can just pull this bolt out here, we'll slide it off, and then slide the new one over the sprockets and slide it on. The sprockets themselves look okay. I didn't see much for wear on those. You'll start to see the teeth getting sharper, and they're nice and squared off still, and in the grooves there's not a lot of wear, so it's looking like it's the chain that is our biggest downfall. And then the side-to-side movement of the chain is really loose too, so we'll probably end up replacing that while we're here. So what I'm going to do to keep everything straight is I'm going to place, so this is a friction disc first, so I'm going to kind of let these drain off in the bucket a little bit, and then set a friction disc down in, and then I have the old stuff here, so I'm going to flip that so we know, and we're just going to keep kind of going in order with how that is, which this might be a little bit difficult to get that hub back down in there doing it this way, but so then I'll flip one of these because I just put a steel disc in. And we'll just keep going in that order, that way we won't mess anything up. Try to line these steels up the same. Like that. And that hub still might give us trouble getting that in there, but you can see the color difference between these and those old discs, how black those old discs are. And then now that we're to the outside, that's this different part number steel disc that we had. It does look like it's made out of a little bit different material. So I think that might be part of the difference with it. And then this friction disc is narrower, as you can see. It doesn't quite cover the whole steel like the other one was. And then this already has these rings on it, these spacer rings that are in the parts diagram, and I did mark everything. We'll see if we can get this to set down. And that did sit down in there. I might drop it out of here just to make sure they're all, yeah, see how it's squished all the way together there. And this part, I marked that, but this part actually spins, so it's not going to be the same. But I did mark the hub to that part, so that's squished in there like it should. That's as far as we go together with it before we put it actually in the bike, because we have this nut and the washers that go in there, which I did order a new nut also, because it has a tab that you bend down. Well, it's just a ring around there, but then you bend part of that down into a keyway, and it usually breaks on the old one, so you're better off just buying a new nut. So we've got that all together. Now we've got to put this oil pump chain in there before we assemble the rest of this clutch back together. I had to grab some gloves so I could hang on to this. It was coming loose. There's some Loctite in there. And then this will slide off. We can slide that out a little bit. I'll just set that back on there for now. So now, if you look at kind of how much of a U shape that makes, and this one, it goes a little bit, but it's not half as bad. And you kind of go like that, and you can tell how floppy they are. You can tell they're worn out. And this does say out on the gear also, so you don't end up putting it on backwards. There we go. It still has a little bit of play to it, but it's not half as bad as this other chain was. So then I'm gonna clean up the threads a little bit on this bolt, and then I'm gonna put some Loctite on there again, just to make sure. If that comes loose, that could be catastrophic, so you don't want that coming loose. It'll pretty much, you won't be getting any oil flow anymore, so your bike will seize up pretty quickly after that. We'll throw a glove back on and we'll get it snugged up. I'll have to look up there. Should be a torque spec for this, but for now I'll just snug it down. Kind of let it pinch my finger in there so it would stay. And that seems to spin good, so This bike has like 17,000 miles on it, so it's not unheard of that the chain would be starting to get worn. Like I said, you can see, I don't know how well that shows up on camera, how much of a U shape that makes, but you can go like that with it and pretty much see that it's worn, and then you can go back and forth on each individual link and feel that there's a little bit of play in it, which shouldn't be there. And then, so this part here, it's kind of spring loaded, and you don't want to have it like off of the springs like that. You want to see how it's just a little bit before, so when we put that on, we'll have to kind of turn that, put pressure on the springs and get the teeth lined up from the outside gear to the inside gear. That's a pretty important thing to watch also. So I did some searching and I found, couldn't find the actual manual for it online. I ended up just finding a few pages out of a forum that somebody had posted, and the torque on this nut is 15 Newton meters. Let's see if I can hold this. I'm not sure how to hold this and tighten it at the same time. So I couldn't find an easy way to hold this, but I got to looking at everything, and it looks like I can still get at this nut or bolt when I have the clutch on, so that'll hold everything, because this locks into the clutch. These tabs go into these 4 holes here. So I'm just gonna assemble the clutch. We're dripping some. So this is a little bit difficult because we need to spin that shaft to the right spot, plus I need to get this gear in the right spot. So I'm going to pull it back off a little bit. It still didn't work. There we go, that part went in, and we've got our little bit of spring tension. And then that is locked in place. So we should be good that way. And this is flush. If this was sticking out, I would say we're not locked in there all the way. But I think we're good for that. I'll put this nut on here quick before we lose everything. There was 2 washers that went in here. There's one thinner one that goes first, and then this thicker one actually says outside on it. It's got a little bit of a crown in it, so you want to make sure it goes on the correct way. We'll just do this by hand, and then I'm going to still make sure we have everything in place before we go tightening this down. So I did manage to get this torque down without the actual tool. I couldn't find the tool that you're supposed to use on this. It's kind of a flat plate that fits inside. It's got 4 holes in it that fits over these, and then these indents, it's got little slots so it holds on here and here, so it kind of holds everything in place so you don't risk breaking these off or anything. But I saw a bunch of Honda ones, but they didn't have one for this 500X. So I had this spanner wrench, and I kind of fit it in there and angled it down like that and put a vice grips on it, and then held that while I held the torque wrench And then it was 128 Newton meters that I tightened this to. I'll put it what it is in foot pounds on the screen here somewhere, so you can have that. And then I did buy a new nut for this, so there's a little tab here that we'll put a punch down in, and we'll pound that down. You can see on the old nut there's a spot right there where it's kind of broke. That's why I bought a new nut, because a lot of times it does tighten down to the same spot, so you have trouble pounding that down. So I'll get a punch and we'll pound that down, and then we'll continue putting this together. I've got a punch here. I'm going to see if this will work to pound that down. I had it kind of mashed down in there. Need to get it closer to the edge, but it keeps slipping. I might get like a kind of like a chisel edge or something to put in there. There, I got it mashed down there. I use this chisel. It doesn't have a sharp edge. You wouldn't want to use a sharp edge on that, because that would end up cutting into that, and you don't want to cut it. You just want to bend it down. So then we can put our little pusher in there. And then we've got all of our clutch springs. And we'll slide that one in. I did have, I'll put this where I had it marked. I don't know if it matters, but I had a mark there and there. So I just would rather be overkill on marking stuff and putting it back together the same than not doing it all at all and having it out of a balance or something. And we'll just cinch these down by hand, and then I'll get the torque specs for this and we'll torque this down. So these bolts are 12 Newton meters, so it's not very much torque. I'll go around and check them one more time. Then you want to make sure that this spins still in the middle. You don't really have to put that in until you're done, but I already had them snugged up and then I put it in there. You can get that bearing crooked and this will kind of bind, so you want to make sure that spins, because that'll wear that out if it gets stuck and it's not spinning. So I think we're about ready. Oh, I have to torque this sprocket down here. That one was 15 Newton meters. So none of this is a huge amount of torque other than that center nut. That one was 128 Newton meters. I think that's around 90 some foot-pounds. I'll just put the torque specs in the description. That'll be easier than me trying to remember to put it in the video. So that one's good. Then I'm gonna clean up this cover, and then we'll have to put our own gasket maker on this. I'm gonna use an anaerobic gasket maker. This is a machined surface, so when that squishes, that's what hardens the sealer, is the actual squish, the pressure. Otherwise, if you use like silicone, that can actually get pushed in and get into oil galleys and stuff, and that'll cause problems, so I don't like using that on stuff like this. So I'll get this cleaned up, and then once we're putting it back together, I'll bring you back. So this is the anaerobic gasket maker that I'm gonna use. It's Permatex. It's 51813 is the number on it. This is the stuff I like to use on anything that's a machined surface. So I'm gonna finish getting this cleaned up a little bit more, and then we're gonna put a bead of this around there, and then we're ready to squish it together. I did wash all this in the parts washer to get it cleaned up too. All right, so I've got a bead of the sealer on here. I'm gonna carefully put this cover on. It's got a couple alignment dowels that we just had to line up, and that aligns the cover. We'll just snug all these screws down, and then we'll torque them. So I've got it all snugged down, and the manual says 12 Newton meters to torque these cover bolts to, which is about 8.8 foot-pounds. I just put it to Newton meters and then put it there, and then I can just change it back to foot-pounds. This is just a Quinn digital torque wrench from Harbor Freight, and they didn't really have a way to tighten it, so I'm just kind of gonna go back and forth on the cover here until we get them all tight. So what I usually do when I'm torquing down something like this is I'll snug down all the bolts lightly, and then I do a crisscross pattern to get them to the torque value, and then I go around and do every one in a circle just to make sure they're all at the same torque. Otherwise, if you accidentally missed one when you're going on the zigzag pattern and you don't go around, you might have one that ended up getting skipped and it's just snugged down. So I like to go around it again to just make sure I've got everything correct. And then I did have to put this bracket on here for the clutch cable, and it looks like we've got quite a bit of slop there, so I'm gonna tension that up just a little bit. You can see where I had already adjusted it a little looser. And there's quite a bit of play there yet. And we'll adjust it up at the handlebars too. I'm not sure where that adjustment is. We'll leave it like that with a little bit of slop. Then I'll have to come back and tighten those down too. And then up at the handlebar, this is adjusted in as far as it'll go so we can tension it up there. The pull does feel okay, there's just too much slop here. So we'll just turn this out a little bit. That's a little too much. You want a little bit of slop so you make sure that your clutch is actually engaging fully. There we go, that feels pretty good. It is moving that arm slightly, but you can feel it in the arm too, where it's not hitting until I push it forward a little ways, so it's fully engaging. This is something you do have to readjust, especially after putting a new clutch in. It'll get broken, and you might have to readjust that after a while. This one was adjusted quite a bit just because they were having problems with it, so they were readjusting it, getting it to work better, because as they wear, this will change where it needs to be fully engaged. But I think that's good for now. I'm gonna throw a new oil filter on it before we put the skid plate back on, just because it'll be easier to get in there, and then we'll put the skid plate back on after we do the filter, and then we should be good to put some oil in it and test it out. So this oil filter was pretty tight, so I'm gonna have to use this pliers on it to get it off. There we go. Boy, this one drains like right next to the exhaust. Some of them are really terrible where they drain right on the exhaust. This one's super close. I think it's almost touching it a little bit. I've got a actual Honda oil filter for it, so it really wasn't much more than just the actual aftermarket one, so I figured I might as well get that. I did put some oil around the O-ring on there. That surface looked clean yet, so I'm trying to do this with one hand. I got the camera here. There we go. I just got just a little bit on the exhaust. Otherwise, some of like the 4 cylinders and stuff, they come right up over, so that when you drain it, it just goes all over the exhaust, and then when you start it up, it smokes off of there and stuff. So that's a pretty good design to keep it right off to the side of that. Now I think we can put the skid plate back on it and fill it up with oil. Well, I got it filled up with oil. I put 3 quarts in it. It shows just under 3 quarts that it holds, but being that we really drained this thing with this cover off for so long, it is going to hold a little bit more than what the average oil change is. So we've still got to fill that oil filter too, so when you run it or pull it up to level, I don't know if that picks up too much on camera or not, but you can see we're just shy of the full line. But I'm gonna run it this way, and then we'll check it again when it's warm and see, make sure nothing's leaking. I don't see anything leaking at the moment. A lot of times that shows when it gets hot, but that anaerobic sealer has pretty much never failed me, so I should quit saying that, but it usually makes a really good seal. So I wiped off all the excess of it up top here where I could get at it, but I maybe do a little bit more down below here. But other than that, it's kind of hard to get into some of these spots, but that'll just come off on its own too. So I think we're ready to fire it up and take it outside and see how it rides. So I got it running outside. It's burning some of that junk off of the exhaust from where it dripped on there. Other than that, it looks like it's running okay and the clutch is working good. So we'll take it for a little test drive. Well, everything seemed to work good. There was no oil leaks. It's still kind of burning some of that junk off of the exhaust here. I didn't think we really got that much on there, but apparently it was kind of coated with it. You could see it once it got hot, but there's nothing leaking out of here. That was the main issue that I was worried about, was maybe having a leak down there, but everything looks good. I might have to do some fine tuning on this here, as I lost some of the free play, but that's going to happen when you're wearing in a new clutch. So it shifted really good. I adjusted it on the handlebars just a little bit up here. I just adjusted it out a little bit, so we got a little bit more pull. But other than that, I think we should be good. I'll probably just loosen this a little bit more so we get some free play back in there, and then that'll be good to go. So I think that's gonna do it for this one. I don't do too many motorcycle videos, but I do sprinkle them in here and there. They don't seem to do quite as well as my other ones, but I'm sure a few of you appreciate the motorcycle stuff. So if you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.